What's going on, guys? Thank you for tuning in to CRÜZR Radio episode 34. I am your host, Michael Brandon, and today I am joined with my co-host, Hunter Harris. And our special guest for the day is the Director of Eastern Operations over at Skre Gear, Mr. Locke Wheeler himself. On today's episode, we talk about what food plot is best for year-round purposes that is also still high in protein and low in maintenance. The second thing that we talk about the most is going to be how to hunt mature bucks when you're bow hunting. So let's tune in. Let's get into it. Right on. Well, what's going on, Locke?
You know, it's May, so it's getting hot.
Yeah, it is.
And turkey season has ended, and we are now in the doldrums. There's not a lot going on. I am personally on a mission to do more land management on my home property here than I have before. So I'm trying to not only provide more food for my deer, but I'm also trying to make my whole process easier. So I'm establishing clover.
Okay.
And basically, so the process here is you plant in the fall, and I plant a lot of clover in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And in the spring, early spring, like for me, it's March down here, early March. When the clover's up and all of your grasses and stuff start to sprout, when they get to 3 to 6 inches and they really start to grow, you go in and spray it with clethodim, which won't hurt clover, just kills the grass.
Gotcha.
And then there's another chemical called 2,4-D-B. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with 2,4-D. It kills everything. But if you get 2,4-D-B with butirac in it, it won't kill clover, and it'll kill all the weeds and crap that the grass killer doesn't get. So you spray it with that, and then you overseed clover again. And so the idea is once the clover establishes, as long as you don't get a drought and burn it up,
right.
When you come back in late summer, fall, you don't have to disc everything back up. You can basically go in there and mow it, and that will spread more clover seed, and then just broadcast cereal grains like cereal rye, wheat, oats, that kind of stuff. You can just broadcast it in there, let it grow with your clover, and then come back and do it again in the spring. And you don't have to disc your plots up, but like every 3 or 4 years. And you kind of keep that nitrogen in the soil and all that. And I can tell you this, I planted a lot of clover in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I overseeded a significant amount of clover in February, and I started spraying it in March. I just finished spraying another round, and I fertilized it last week. And just yesterday afternoon, I went riding around on my e-bike trying to shoot hogs. And
sounds like fun.
I think I saw like 13 deer in the clover at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. You know?
Sheesh.
So
nice.
Spread apart different, plots. Now this is wooded.
We could hear him loud and clear, and then it just.
Yeah, it sounds like a connection.
Yeah, it did. I'm back now.
There he is. He's back.
It blinked. What's the last thing you heard me say?
Plots in the woods.
Yeah, plots in the woods.
Yeah, it's a wooded property, so my plots aren't real big.
Right.
And so these deer, they're scattered out amongst, 3 here and 2 here and 4 here and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And was what I was saying when it broke up is the clover is, like I said, last year it was so dry that kind of burned up a lot of it. But the clover has like 17 or 18% protein, I think.
Dang.
And if you can keep it established all summer, they will hammer it. And it just does. Once you get it established, it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, and it cuts down on your expense and your time managing, and it provides that food source to, kind of bring deer in and hold them
right,
and give them what they need without having to spend a lot of money on supplemental feed and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And I know y'all got, there's turkey seasons in other parts of the country, but down here we're done with that. So.
Yeah, ours is still going strong. I need to get back out into the woods and get me a bird before it's all over. So you went with clover. Is this your first season using clover for food?
No, I've always planted clover in my fall mixes.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first year. Well, I tried last year, but most of the country we had a drought last summer, and it was real bad down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do this last year, and it literally by like the 1st of July, everything was burnt up. I mean, I didn't even have to cut grass for most of the summer. But I've always planted clover, always, but I haven't done it like this where I try to keep it established all year. I've always just planted it and would let it grow and would try to spray it a little bit in the spring so the clover would do good for spring and early summer. And then I would just kind of let it go, and like most people, and then come back late summer and just bush hog it, spray it, burn it, whatever, and then disc it up and start over again.
Yeah.
But I'm learning some stuff, and some people that are kind of teaching me a little bit. You know, there's a lot of benefit to not turning that dirt over every single year, because that dirt has a root system, and the clover puts a lot of nitrogen in there, and you're basically just starting over every year if you disc it every year.
Right.
And if you
that makes sense.
So if you can manage it up until that point, then it's already sustainable, and there's a lot of nutrients already there. And if you just broadcast right before a rain, those cereal grains, they'll grow on concrete, you know?
Yeah,
right, sure.
So for our listeners, you said down here, where are you talking about?
I'm in Louisiana, and I am basically, if you look at a map where Mississippi makes the kind of sharp 90-degree angle corner in the southwest of Mississippi, I'm right on the state line in that corner. So I'm maybe 20 miles east of the Mississippi River bottoms and about 10 miles south of the line. And I grew up in that southwest corner of Mississippi, so I'm not real far from home. But yeah, I'm in Louisiana, not deep South Cajun Louisiana, but Louisiana.
Still in Louisiana.
Sure.
It's still Cajun, but it's not. If you get down here and you call yourself a Cajun in this part, the real Cajuns would kind of scoff at you about that.
I gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. So you went with clover. You've been doing it for a few years now. Is that the only food source that you plant?
So no. I plant in the fall. I'll plant a mix, and it'll have cereal rye, winter wheat, forage oats, turnips, rape, and a mixture of different clovers. Sometimes alfalfa and just other cereal grains and stuff like that, and other broadleafs. That stuff, it's just rotational. It grows in the winter into the spring, and then it kind of gets taken over by the summer grasses, and you start over. And then the other thing I have done that works really, really well, but I'm not doing it anymore because of just the time it takes. An iron clay pea is basically it's almost like a soybean, essentially. And if you plant those in the summertime, like, you're never going to get a pea because they just mow it down. But they're expensive. You got to do it just right at the right time, like late spring. Down here, it's usually this time between now and the middle of June is when you plant them.
Sure. So maybe not very forgiving.
No. And the other problem is when you get to the fall, if you plant pea plots, when you get to the fall, they're like a kind of a ground growing vine, kind of, a soybean kind of grows on a stalk.
Right.
It's if you'll plant sunflowers or vetch or milo or something in there, it'll grow on that plant, but it's still more of a vine, and your food plot ends up with like just covered in these vines and stuff, from what I found. And then you come in there and you go to bush hogging and disking, and that stuff is just a mess, and you end up with these big balls of weeds that you got to clean. And honestly, unless you had the time and money to like fence off your spots and let it really get up, they just mow it down before it ever gets even close to
mature.
But I mean, they will eat it. Like, it's insane how much they like it. Like,
sure, they love it. They just don't give it a chance.
They don't give it a chance, and it's expensive, and it's kind of you got to do it just right to really get a good yield off of it. And I mean, I can tell you a story that to me is like the biggest kind of highlight for how good that they like that. Is about 5 years ago, I planted it, and within a week or two of it coming up, basically my food plots looked like an infield on a baseball field that hadn't been taken care of. So there's a little grass coming up in it, but you can still see it dirt.
Right.
That's what my food plots look like. And I went driving back there, and this is a property that's right here at my house, and so I just jumped on my side by side. I went driving back there. It's like 2:30 in the afternoon in July or August. It's like 105 degrees, and there are deer out in it.
Oh,
golly.
And I'm like, y'all, at like 2 or 3
Couldn't help
different fields,
themselves.
I'm like, y'all are going to have a heat stroke.
Yeah.
So they really do like it. But like I said, I'm trying the clover thing because it's more food per pound, per acre, per square foot or whatever. It's more of it. It lasts longer. It continues to grow. And We'll see. I'm trying to feed my deer, but I'm also trying to attract more deer and hold more
Sure.
deer.
Right.
And
So is
so.
clover? Is clover like a good
Dude,
all season
deer
Yes.
love
all season
clover.
food source?
It is, and it's great for turkeys too. The turkeys love it too.
Yes.
If
So
you
it's just
open
a good all around food source.
For
Can't
sure.
really go wrong with
is.
it.
For sure.
right, and it's good, and it's a good one to have in the off season too, because like I mentioned earlier, it's got so much protein when the antlers are growing, and the does are pregnant. They're getting a lot out of that clover.
Sure.
Right.
You know, they're getting a lot of nutritional value out of it, so it's good to have it there. And the greatest thing about clover is not every kind of clover, but like you've seen the clover that has the little white flower on top.
Mm-hmm.
Those, and there's some other different kinds. They're not annual, they're perennial, so they basically reseed themselves. And so
Oh, nice.
you still want to overseed and kind of keep that process up. But if you get a good established stand of clover, you can go in there in the late summer and just mow it
down.
high, where you just clipping the tops off, and it just spreads more clover seed all over the place.
Oh,
You
beautiful.
know, so yeah, it's a good kind of foundation. And like I said, it also, how clover is, it's thick and it's a broadleaf.
Mhm.
So once you get it right and it grows thick, it canopies the ground, and it kind of does a lot. It does a lot of the weed control on its own once you get it right.
It chokes all them out.
Yeah, so it's a lot less on you as a land manager in terms of chemicals and time on the tractor and stuff. It really kind of takes care of itself. It's just I'm in the process of the front end of it, but once you get
Mhm.
here, I mean, the goal is anyway for me to have a much more not only do I have a good food source year round, but I have a much easier management.
Sure.
Right.
plan.
It's not going to take as much work to upkeep it and make sure it's still plentiful. Deer still
Yep.
keep coming around to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No. That
Yeah, because
sounds
you think about, especially in the South, for people in the South that are familiar, we got just, to my eye, hundreds of thousands of different just weeds and grasses that
Oh
just
gosh.
Oh, there's
yes.
grow.
Yeah.
They just take over in the spring and summer.
100%.
And you look at a food plot in the woods or in a thick area, by June,
They're
that's-
toast.
I'm sure there's something in there that
Fried
the
up.
deer can eat, but it's really just junk.
It's overtaken by weeds. Yeah.
And so doing it this way, to Michael's point, it's a year-round deal, and your turkeys can come out in it, because the turkeys, other than when they're brooding their poults, I mean, they don't want to walk around in grass that tall. I mean, they get
Heck
eaten
no.
really easy.
Right.
So it's good for all of that. The only problem we have in the South is that the hogs actually like it too.
Mm.
Oh no. Yeah.
So that's a whole nother thing. But the hogs like everything. I mean,
I
I
was
was
about
about
to
to
say,
say,
I
what
don't-
don't they like?
I don't know what they don't
Yeah.
eat. So.
Well, I can say for me right now,
They don't like
the-
lead.
the good thing, yeah, they like lead. They don't like it, but they can eat it.
I'll
So
feed it to them.
The good thing is, like, the hogs aren't rooting them up. They're eating in them, but they're just grazing in them.
They just
like a
picking the
deer.
tops off of them or something.
Yeah, they're just eating them just like a deer or cow or something. They're just grazing.
Well, that's
they're not
better
actually
than
rooting
just-
up the ground.
Right. Destroying them.
Destroying the dirt
I-
and everything else.
Making mud holes
Oh,
out of the clover
yeah.
fields.
Oh, I'd be mad as a freaking hornet if they were digging my shit up.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. So I was watching this online seminar the other day, and it was talking about food plots. And this guy was talking about, I can't remember what he referred to it as, but he gave the example of if you had like a 40-acre plot, 40-acre food plot surrounded by hardwoods, if you were to keep that 40-acre wood plot just open to where you could see from corner to corner, side to side, all the way across, you might, let's just say, for example, you might have 12 does that kind of go into that field and feed and graze and whatnot. And there might be 2, maybe 3 bucks that will walk the perimeter and come to the edge of the food plot, look across, see what's out in the field, spot a couple of does, and then they'll leave. Or they might, they might wander into the food plot. He was talking about,
like strategy wise?
yeah, strategy wise, to yield more bucks on your property, to have more bucks and keep them on the property for longer. And what he was saying, I wish I knew the guy's name so I could give him credit. But he was talking about, I I can't remember what he referred to it as, but it's almost like putting up curtain blinds in the plot. So he said you'd get like some kind of tall grass or something that could block the visual across the field. And you would take that same 40-acre food plot and just put, I don't know, 2-foot wide rows of something that's tall enough to where the buck that comes to the edge of the field can't see all the way across the field.
Right.
He can only see, a quarter of the way across, and you have 4 of these plots. So you're only losing, I don't know, 8 feet worth of rows in the whole plot. He was like, but those bucks are not only going to check that one plot anymore. They're going to go to every single one of them. They're going to look across the fields. They're going to see what's in the fields, what's staying there. And then they're also going to take more time by walking around them and making rubs and scrapes and marking their scents on each individual window is what he was referring to them as. Because you got the blinds, instead of the buck just making one scrape or one rub in a corner or opposite corner, he might have 2 or 3 scrapes and only spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes there checking it out. If you were to divide it up into 4 shorter or smaller segments, he's going to have 10 to 12 different locations that he goes through and puts the scents on.
Basically just keeping him busier.
Exactly. But it
keeps him hanging around.
Yeah. And not to mention it's limiting his visual sense as well. So if there's other bucks on the property, it might be in the other plot, 2 plots down and have no idea that they're there. So you might go from 2 to 3 bucks on a 40-acre plot to 10 bucks on the same 40-acre plot just for the fact that they can't see each other.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, I saw that actually. It was on a TikTok video.
Yeah, that's where I saw the clip, and then I went and watched a YouTube video. It was like I watched like 30 minutes of it. It was pretty good. I know a lot of people that do a lot of food plot and habitat management, specifically more in the Midwest and more open areas, and they do that. They the juries talk about that a lot. Gotcha.
I'm not gonna try to name them because I've heard them, but I can't remember. There's certain grasses that you can buy and plant that will grow like 6 feet tall.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And they do that, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with that, but I know that in the South anyway, and like for us, I mean, the property I'm talking about where I'm doing all the clover, I mean, it's 400 acres and 300 of it is 8-year-old pine thicket. And most of these plots are either, they're either right on the edge of where the pines start, or they're out actually in them old loading sites from the loggers.
Right.
And the hardest thing, to me, pine thicket whitetails are the hardest ones to kill in the country to me, because they, in similar fashion to like what you're talking about with food plot architecture, when you're in these pines, those deer can walk 30 to 50 yards inside those thick pines, and they can circle those plots. They can see them and they can smell them, and they never have to step out in them. And you'll never know they're there.
Yeah, because it's so thick.
Right. If a buck in the Midwest comes cruising down a hedgerow, or, comes up out of a hardwood,
you're going to lay
bottom,
eyes on him.
Yeah, you're going to see him. And that's the hardest thing about and most of the deer that we do kill in the food plots, or bucks anyway, is during the rut where there's a doe out there when he makes that move and you're there, and he comes out in the plot after her.
Or else you might not ever kill, or you probably would never kill him.
Or even get a chance.
No, you gotta. The other thing that the way that I hunt it, I don't really hunt the plot that hard unless I'm taking a kid or somebody who just kind of wants to make a casual hunt, wants to see deer. Because I don't, for me, I'm hunting mature bucks with a bow 99% of the time.
Yeah.
And there is, from my estimation, just doing camera surveys and hunts over, let's say, a 20-year period, it's my estimation that a mature buck in the South anyway, he's only going to come out in that food plot in the daylight maybe 5 or 6 times a year.
Yeah, maybe.
Now, maybe. And so now you do the math. You know, are you going to be there on one of those days?
Yeah.
And how many times is he smart enough to circle that entire half-acre plot in the middle of that pine thicket and get downwind of you 50 yards in that thicket, and you never know he's there, and you never even know it.
Yeah.
You know,
On
and
the
so
chance that you're there on the day that he would have walked out.
Yeah, and so it becomes a real statistical anomaly almost that you're there on the day that he's love struck enough that he's not going to go all the way around the field
and venture through the field,
and he's just going to come straight out in it after the doe, or you know, or whatever. Now, the only exception to that, and that I've seen, and this is still not, to me, it's not a high percentage deal, but if you have a good piece of property where you manage the hunting pressure on it well enough that the deer are comfortable enough, late season when there's no hard mass in the woods and even all the briar stuff is kind of wilted and dried up, late season you can see more deer and have a better chance of an older deer actually coming out and feeding because they're just hungry. You know, that would be the one exception. But even that, in the South, it doesn't really get cold enough often enough to really drive a ton of daylight movement. So still, even that starts happening in the dark. You know, so the food plots for me become like kind of playing back into what you were talking about, Michael. I've heard a lot, and I've seen the video you're talking about, or at least part of it. And I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do with food plot architecture, but I think it does depend on where you're at. Like,
for sure,
if you have the landscape where you can do that and deer are more visible, that kind of stuff works. But for me, I mean, I don't think it would change anything. You know, I mean, they use the pine thickets as the cover.
Right.
So
you've already got that natural breakup.
So the food plots for me is I'm feeding does. That's what I'm doing. I'm feeding does because I want as many does as possible on my
because
property.
if the does are there, the boys are going to be there.
The boys are going to be there. They're going to show up later in the season when the rut starts, you know, getting going. And that honestly, we kind of have a rule. I mean, it's just 3 or 4 of us that hunt this place that I have, and we don't really shoot does on food plots. You know, we'll let a kid shoot one during youth weekend just to kill their first deer or something like that. But we don't shoot does on the food plots because we want does in them food plots every day if we can in the daylight.
Right. I mean, it goes back to what your goal was. I mean,
that's going to increase the chances of
mature bucks walking
them making
into
a
the
stupid
property.
move of walking into the.
Well, the way I hunt them to that point is if I know I've got, let's say, a kind of a group of 5 or 6 mature does, and I know that they're bedding somewhere close because they're in this food plot an hour before dark every day. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm picking the spots where I can hunt a couple 100 yards off the plot where I know that buck is cruising around smelling.
Gotcha.
Sure. You know, I'm trying to use that to my advantage, and that's where the mobile hunting is really key there because that can change. You know, I mean, from year to year, this spot's better, you know, just based on the year and the deer population of that season and stuff like that. But
based on the variables.
I find that in that scenario, the deer, the buck that you're after is a lot more huntable because, like I said, if you get yourself on that field, he doesn't ever have to show himself and figure out you're there because he's going to walk he's going to get in a, this is kind of my guess, but he's going to get somewhere between 40 and 100 yards off of the plot, and he can walk the whole thing and scent check the whole thing. So there is no downwind advantage for you because he's eventually going to come in behind you. And honestly, I think they're smart enough down here where they get a lot of pressure. I think they're smart enough that they don't even have to walk the whole thing. They know which direction the wind's going, and that's how they approach.
Sure.
Same thing same thing with bait piles and feeder pens and stuff like that. A mature enough buck, he wakes up that day and he decides, hey, I'm gonna go check, see if I can get something to eat or if there's a doe there. He knows, and he changes his approach to that location based off the wind. And so that's a low percentage chance. But if I get 200 yards off of that food source in a likely area that he's that he's traveling through to go check it, or maybe just passing by, he might be just paralleling it, you know. He's a lot more comfortable in that. Now, of course, you end up in spots where you can't see a long way, and and it's kind of tight cover, and those sometimes are more boring hunts because you don't see a lot of action and it all kind of happens fast. But if your target is a mature buck, then you kind of
you got to go where he's going to be.
You got to strategize a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can either spend the entire season just flipping a coin, throwing at a dartboard, hoping you're sitting in the right spot when he's dumb enough to make a mistake.
I was about to say that sounds like my strategy.
That's what most people do. And honestly, there's a lot of days where I'm probably in that mold too, where I'm just like,
give me the dart.
I don't know where to go. Let me just go. Maybe I'll get lucky.
I just close my eyes and climb the first tree I bump into.
I try not to hunt that way because I guess over the years of hunting, and it's gotten to where, this might sound a little crazy, but it's gotten to where if I get up in the tree, even if I'm wrong and nothing happens, if I feel like I'm hunting with a plan, I'm more like focused and motivated.
Sure. Oh yeah, dude. I completely understand that.
If I just go in the woods and just pick a tree and be like, there's a few acorn trees around here. I mean, I know the deer pass through here. Maybe they'll pass by today. After an hour, I'm like, shit, this is boring.
Yeah.
But I can make the same hunt. I can make the same hunt and just sit there and constantly psych myself out to believe, hey, man, I got a plan here, and when that plan comes together, it's gonna be awesome. I don't know. I kind of have to self-motivate in that way some.
Sure. So I've been relatively self-taught on a lot of my deer hunting strategies so far, because I've only been doing it for a few years now. I think this season will be my 4th or 5th season. And so what I was doing the last 2 years, and it's worked out for me. I've been getting in pretty close to my target bucks. I haven't taken any of them down, unfortunately, so it might not be working. But what I've been doing is scouting out the land that I'll be hunting with whatever e-scout I use on X, get an idea of where I think they're going to be, and then I get boots on the ground, try to find some sign, and then what I do from there is I instead of going on top of where I found the sign, I'm going farther away to where almost too far to where I don't think I'll ever have a shot at the deer, but I'll be able to see where they're coming from and where they're going to.
Right.
And then on my hunts moving forward from that point on,
eke your way in.
I'm like, okay, I think I can approach from here, get into this zone, and have plenty of shooting lanes from here, because I don't have much experience planting food plots or setting out anything, honestly. Like super minimal. It's just me, my bow, and whatever hunting equipment I have. I just let the terrain feed the deer and I don't try to change anything in their home space.
Mm-hmm.
Just because mainly I think I don't have enough knowledge about it to go in and interfere and try to improve it. I think I'll actually decrease the quality of whatever they're feeding in and walking around in. And it's worked pretty good so far. But that clover fields, that is absolutely something I could do.
Yeah, well, what you're talking about is what I term and what I've heard termed as observation sits, and I think they're very, very valuable. I still do observation sits a lot, even in places where I'm managing it and I know everything about the place, because like I mentioned earlier, things change. And especially down here where I'm at, where there's a lot of timber management, we also typically get hurricanes and tornadoes. We get storms in the spring and summer, and that knocks timber down. It seems like that happens at least every other year, if not every year.
It changes their routes.
Right.
It changes some things. And a lot of times I'll get on the edge of a hardwood. Like, let's just say I've got that clover field is in the pines, but it's 200 or 300 yards off of the hardwood edge. Well, I know that some deer are bedding in the pines. They're going straight to the clover, and then they're going the other route into the hardwoods to eat hard mass and stuff like that. A lot of times I'll back off where I suspect a lot of the deer travel is happening. I'll back off of it and make an observation sit, because when I make that sit, I'm hoping that I see deer travel that kind of confirms before I get in there and
mess something up.
I mess something up. I think I know, but I end up just 30 yards down on the wrong wind side of where they're primarily coming and going.
Sure.
And it really comes down to just a visual there, because if I don't get on the hardwood edge, I can't see enough. I can't, like, you try to hunt in the pines and it's too thick. You don't know whether you've bumped deer or not.
Right.
A lot of times. And so I still do that. Like, regardless of the land I'm managing and what I know about the food source and stuff like that, especially earlier in the year before. Now, a lot of times as the year goes on, I've made enough of those sits that I've started to kind of figure out through my own scouting and through my own observation sits. I've started to figure out kind of how the deer are using this area, and then I can start making more dialed in plans. But you were talking about that, Michael, kind of along the lines of still being kind of new to it and figuring it out. But what you're doing is smart. I mean, I think people that have been hunting for myself, as an example, have been hunting for 30 something years. Since I was a kid, I still hunt that way. So that's actually smart. I think it's smart what you're doing.
Right on. I'm glad I'm on the right trail. Hopefully before hopefully not before too long. It'll work out for me. The whole plan will work out.
The thing about it is I think when we talk about things like this and strategies like this, you need to separate what your goal is from your strategy. Because if you're hunting, if you just want to get a shot at a deer, if you're a new hunter and you're like, look, I don't mind tagging a doe. I don't mind shooting a younger buck. I want to get my feet wet. I want to kill a deer. That's different. But if you're hunting a mature buck and you go and scout this terrain edge of, like, for me, pines and hardwoods or whatever, and you go scout that and you see a bunch of sign and you just go blow up in there and be like, I know there's deer traveling here. I can see it. And you just go in there and start hanging cameras and getting in there tight, and you don't really know. Like I said, all you got to do is cross the wrong trail walking in, or set up 30 yards the wrong way with whatever wind, and you're still guessing how they're coming and how they're using it. And for a mature buck, it only takes one time, and that's that. Now you gotta start over, because I mean, unless he's in a very vulnerable position with a doe in the rut or something, like, that's it. Like I said, the strategy changes. If you're just trying to get close to deer, then heck yeah, man, go find that feed tree, get up in there,
sit right on it,
get a shot at a deer. But if you're hunting a mature buck, it is, in my experience and in my opinion, it's much smarter to take your time and learn as much as you can without him knowing you're there.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, because you're not going to get many chances at all with a big buck, with a mature buck.
Well, you might only get one.
I was about to say, you might only get one, depending on the deer. Just from what I've been told from other people, I mean, 2 is probably max. Like, if you bump him twice, if he gets you twice.
Well, I know you hear stories of guys can tell stories at the end of deer season about how they chased this deer all year and they had 5 encounters and they finally were able to get a shot. And I think we hear those stories and we see those stories on podcasts and videos and stuff because they're good stories, but I don't think they represent what happens to most people.
For the majority.
People hunt. Yeah. I think the majority of people hunt a buck, any mature buck, they hunt the crap out of him. If they see him once or twice, they're lucky.
Right. Yeah. They're great stories because they're rare.
Yeah. They're good stories, and they end up out there in the space for us to consume because they're good stories, but they're not a representation. I don't think you should expect, hey, I got this nice target buck on my property and I'm just going to stick with him. And if it takes 15 times, I'm finally going to, that's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to be that way. And I think that kind of highlights a patience factor too. With that in mind, you shouldn't get frustrated and start making moves or making decisions that are kind of aggressive. And be patient, because I think people feel like, man, I'm picking the right days. The wind is right for everything that I've done scouting and studying this whole deal. I know I'm in the right spot. I'm hunting good days, good weather, good pattern, and I'm not seeing this deer. And they start making moves, and it's like,
you haven't done anything wrong.
Right. You got to be more patient in a lot of cases. If you just, you end up making an aggressive move out of just frustration.
And it's the wrong one.
Because that, like I said, for most people, I think it's going to be once or twice at most that you actually encounter that deer.
And don't blow him out of there.
Yeah.
Sure. And it might even be the right move on the wrong day.
Yep.
So it's
It's a fun game.
Yeah, it is. I like it. I like it a lot. It's I like the strategy behind it all. Now, Locke, how do you know when you have found the spot? Like when you're scouting and you're bringing in the deer, how do you know you have found a good spot to hunt?
Well, that question has it depends on the time of the year, honestly. So if we're talking
True.
if we're talking early season, it's a visual game because early season it's a pattern.
Sure.
And if I can't identify, I'm going to identify a pattern either through camera or observation to know these deer are acting fairly regularly every day, and I can really dial in on a spot like that. And that's totally different. When it comes to the rut, which is, I think everybody's chasing the rut to a certain extent because we all know that so many more things open up to you as a hunter, and
that's when you have a little bit of the advantage.
You have an advantage.
Sure,
you have an advantage in the way the deer act, and you also have an advantage in you probably have a lot better weather, more often better weather.
Sure,
gotcha. Yeah, more optimal days.
When you think about deer in the early season, you can pattern a deer, and you can know good and well that target deer is in an area every day. But you might have warm weather and crappy weather and different winds, and you can't ever go hunt him because the weather won't allow you. You get into typically the weather patterns in the rut, you got a more consistent north wind. You got a lot more days where you have a consistent north wind blowing one direction, and cooler temperatures are just naturally gonna offer more deer movement.
Sure.
All of that kind of stuff works to your advantage. So when we get to the rut, that's a hard question to answer, Michael. A lot of times, I do know that I key on does a lot. I hunt where I know there are a lot of does because I'm hunting an area for like my optimal situation is to find a cruising deer because those are the easiest ones to kill. They'll respond to calling. They're kind of, in my opinion,
they're a little bit more aggressive.
Well, and they don't like early season when they're just going to food and bed to food and back and forth and stuff like that. They're kind of on alert.
Yeah, they're a lot more cautious.
They're living that life of a prey animal. When you fast forward to the rut, their mind's on something else, and they don't get up and do it every day. But when they do, they're like on a mission. And I know a lot of people would probably attest to this. It's been my experience that every part of the country that I hunt, when you get a mature buck in that situation and you finally get him on his feet in the daylight, he's not that hard to kill.
No, because he's tunnel vision on a doe.
Yeah, I'm talking about like in the moment. I'm not saying that it's easy to just go out in the woods and see that deer. That's obviously not. That only happens.
I get 100% what you're saying.
He kind of gets on his feet and he's just like he's the man of the woods, and he's walking this wood line or he's walking this fence row and he's just kind of looking for does and checking scrapes, and he's just kind of, unless you just slap him in the face with your scent or something, alert him, he's kind of like
in non land.
I'm the big dog here. I'm just he's not like that damn doe that's like looking up in every tree and smelling every thermal, and he's just kind of boom, 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 down through the woods, and like
my neck in the woods.
I know for me, like if I decide to shoot a doe, it doesn't matter the situation. It is always like pins and needles. When can I stand up? When can I draw back? What's her body language? She's not going to duck the arrow. It's like it's just like heavy pressure to make it all come together. When I'm sitting in the hardwood somewhere or like in a pinch or a funnel or something during the rut and I see him and he's coming, look, I just stand up and get ready. Because he's not, for the most part, like I said, unless you just make some noise or some movement or some just kind of really in his face kind of deal where he's like, oh crap, there's somebody there.
Something to catch his attention.
He's not in the wind as often. He's not looking up. He's not alert like that. He's A to B, making his rounds and shot,
He's more or less just trotting along, trying to get to where he's going, and not really worried about anything in between.
That's how it seems to me. I look at it like I had somebody give me this this kind of analogy, and it's like you take a young dog out in the yard, and he's constantly just smelling everything, and he wants to play, and he wants to bark at everything, and he's everywhere, you know.
Sure.
He's kind of all over the place. You take that old dog that just lays on the porch.
Yeah.
He don't get up and move much, but when he does, he kind of makes his way out there in the yard. He does his deal. He does what he's doing.
He's got his spot. He knows where he's going.
He ain't paying attention to cars passing by on the road or the neighbor. He's just doing his thing. And
been there, done that.
Yep. And that's kind of how I feel like a lot of big deer I've encountered are a lot that way, you know. And I say that's why I want to find that deer, because then there's obviously the time where they're with the does, and then they're hard to kill because the doe's got to walk in range. He's going to follow her, you know. He's
right.
just, and sometimes he's not going to stop, or he's running, or any, you know. They're visible in that moment, but necessarily hunting with a bow is not necessarily a guarantee, because I mean,
there's no telling if they're going to stop for you.
If they're going to stop, if
right.
all of a sudden I've had so many instances in my hunting career where I've had a deer following a doe, and I just knew that it's going to happen. And then out of nowhere, the doe just turns 90 degrees to the left and takes off, and then he's gone out of your life.
Yeah.
Like for no reason. Like she's not spooked. That's just what they do, you know?
Man, that happened to me last season. I've told this before on a previous episode, but I was hunting a target buck. He was probably I don't know. He wasn't huge. He was probably like a 115, 120. I'd have been super happy for sure. 8-point out on public land here. And I did that strategy I had talked about earlier, where I had sat pretty far back, just saw where they were going. Ended up creeping my way in one morning, and had this doe, had these two does sprint across the ridge I was on, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I heard him coming back my direction, but it was my target buck and one of the does running right at me. They came into about, I don't know, 40-ish yards, and then the doe just took, like you said, 90-degree turn and ran straight the opposite direction. And the buck followed, and that was the last time I saw that buck. But I'm sure he's still alive. I don't think anybody is crazy enough but me to climb up that hill. So.
Yeah, I don't know what makes them do that kind of stuff, but it's interesting whatever's going on in their minds and their bodies during that time of the year. I mean, you'll see a doe and she's just feeding along, seems to be on a pretty predictable route, and he's following her, you know, but every now and then she'll bump a little bit, but then all of a sudden she'll just take off running. You know, and I guess that's just part of their estrus cycle, and it's just part of their whole process of courting and breeding and stuff. But yeah. I've had that happen so many times, and it's just like, golly, you feel like 50 more yards, they're coming, and the next thing you know, they're out of your life. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a firm believer, and I feel like most deer hunters would agree that deer have that sixth sense. It's that survival instinct. They, even if they don't smell you or see you, if they don't feel right, they might just leave just because they don't like the way it feels. That sixth sense. They're smart. Yeah. They're hard to get on.
I definitely, and I think that's even more prevalent in higher pressure areas, like the deer. Down here in the South, it's really like that. And I believe they have a sixth sense. I mean, I've had deer, you know, come out in a food plot or something, and everything is perfect. Well, I know they don't smell me, but they come out in the food plot and they're just like, throw their head up, start looking around like something ain't right.
Yep.
And just turn around and leave, and it's like,
what happened? Yeah. I don't get it.
Oh, dude, they do it all the time though.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
I love it. I love them and hate them at the same time.
I don't know if it's that sixth sense that you're talking about, or if it's just like, you know, the doe running the other way. It's just like, you know, wherever you're set up and it's perfect. Like Locke said, you know, they don't smell you, and then it's just like they're coming, and then they stop, and you're like, what's going on? And they're gone.
Boom, vanish.
I really think during the rut, it might be a little bit different reason. Like I think it's just part of their anatomy. Like bucks chasing does is kind of part of what gets them ready for breeding. I feel like and so I think that whole courtship process is really it's kind of chaotic and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it might not be that she has a sense of anything. It's just she's coming into estrus and she's feeling that way, and like running and having him chasing her, I think is part of what gets them, ready to be able to actually stand and breed. And so I think sometimes we're just experiencing that, and then other times it is, when it's especially feeding deer, it's just like for what reason they just know they're in your presence, and then
Sure.
you go on another hunt and same kind of conditions, and deer feed right up underneath you for 45 minutes, and it's like, how in the hell?
Yeah, just loosey goosey, nothing, dude. I mean, I've had them walk right in, Locke, like you said. They just an old doe or something, like they walk right in, like they've done a million times, but this time they just walk right in. They just boom, head right up at you. You're like,
yeah. I try to another thing for me that has been an advantage to hunting more mobile is I think does, because you encounter them so much, they figure out where deer stands are. They're just I've had too many stands in my life where they get hunted regularly enough, and you'll set damn doe will step out and look right at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like she knows that stand's there,
Mm-hmm.
and she's not dumb, and she don't have any reason to believe you're there other than experience, and
Right.
she steps out in the open and looks right at you, you know.
Right.
And so I think that's an advantage to. I try to hunt like I'll hunt the same. I'm technically hunting the same way, but I'll move 20, 25 yards a lot of times. I don't necessarily hunt the same tree all the time. Now I do hunt the same trees. I'll go back to them,
Sure.
but if I hunt a tree and a doe busts me in it, I won't hunt that tree again for a while.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because even if I see her, she's gonna look at me.
Right. Right. I mean, think about it like this: if your neighbor put a birdhouse in one of your trees in your front yard, how long do you think it would take for you to notice?
Yep.
If it was me, I'd probably notice pretty quickly. If not the first day I walked out, it'd probably be the second day I walked out in my front yard. I would notice that birdhouse. And I don't think that's any different for deer. I think if you put up a stand in the woods and they've been walking that section of woods for God knows how long,
and they see you in it,
and you don't even. Personally, I don't even think you have to be in it. I think if you go set it up and you didn't see a doe or any deer at all, whenever you set up a stand and you got out, picture perfect, everything went to plan, that the next time that deer walks through there and it spots it, it knows that it wasn't there before and I should be cautious of it. And it's going to check it out every time it comes through. I'm 100% a firm believer in that.
Well, I believe I've actually had experiences that kind of prove my concept there, where I've climbed a tree and hunted it, and I've had a deer, and I've had an encounter with deer, and not necessarily like the worst kind of deal where they just blow out of there, blowing and tearing the woods, but they get nervous and they look at you and they don't know what you are and they just end up kind of slipping off. I've gone right back in there the next day or similar, or, close time frame, and just moved 20 yards and actually watched those deer look up in that tree I was in.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and in that moment you feel kind of great. You feel like, yeah, hell yeah, I got your ass. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I got
I
you.
fooled you. And then they turn around and look at you in the other tree, and you're like, shit. But no, I have had that. Like I've had areas that I hunt frequently, and there's, not only for wind but also vantage points and different things. I'll hunt different trees around that area, and I've had a deer, kind of get somewhat spooked, whatever, and I decided the next time I went in there, I moved trees and saw deer actually looking in that tree that I've climbed before, because they learn it. I don't see bucks do that, but I see does do that.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, Locke, what would you say is your key to success in the deer woods?
So success, define success here for me. Like success
Sure.
in harvesting a deer, or success in in just encountering a deer and
Well,
having good hunt.
Let's go with encountering deer and having a good hunt. What is your key to success with encountering deer?
My biggest key to success in that is eliminating pressure and hunting the right days. I I am a big believer in I don't just hunt just because I have time to hunt. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, kind of alluded to it a little bit in having a plan and all that. But I have access to places and I can hunt them every day. And with my job and my life schedule, I can hunt a lot. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't subscribe to the hours theory. Now, if I go somewhere in the rut and I've got 7 days to hunt, I'm gonna put in all the hours I can because I'm hunting a cruising deer.
Sure.
But just
Sure.
just typically like your everyday places that you hunt at home or that you hunt every weekend or whatever, like I move around and I don't overpressure a spot and I never hunt a spot if I don't have a reason to be there given the conditions. I
Gotcha.
stay out of them until and that goes not only to weather, but that also goes to time of year. I have spots that I hunt every year and I don't hunt them during certain times of the year. I just don't go in there. I leave them alone completely. And then I only go and I'm real strategic. And I think that is a big key for me is I try to be extremely almost surgical in where I hunt and when I hunt, and I don't over hunt areas because I think human pressure is the hardest thing to overcome.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right. And it's irreversible. Once you've got that
Yeah.
once you've got that human pressure in there, there's not much you can do to change that
Yep.
other than just time.
And I take that into scouting too. Like I know a lot of guys will go and they spend hours. And now during the off season's one thing, but during the season, if I have a spot that I've hunted it for a number of years and I know it,
Mm-hmm.
I spend very little time putting human scent and human presence into those areas.
Sure.
Now, you have to do some of it. I mean, you got to go scout out trees that you can climb. You got to look for deer sign, but I try to do that going in and out of hunts as much as possible. If I
Right.
put cameras in there, I don't check them very often, or I try to use cellular cameras where I try to stay out of those spots. And like I have rut spots that I don't hunt those spots at all unless I think the deer are in a certain phase of the rut.
Sure.
And I'll go in there late September, early October, and I'll make sure my stands are good, or I'll make sure I know what trees I'm going to
Get in,
and
get
whatever.
out.
And I don't go back for 2 months until they start rutting. I don't step foot back in that area. And so I think that to me, I think you're, and I know a lot of guys, you have the weekends to hunt and you want to be in the woods and maybe you don't have a lot of places, so you just hunt the same places over and over. You're really putting yourself into a lottery in that situation. I don't like those odds. I've never been good at winning in raffles or lotteries, and so I don't like my hunting to come down to that.
Sure. You found more success in, let's just say, instead of hunting 5 mediocre days as far as conditions go, you would prefer to hunt the one more optimal day for conditions.
And that's again, I mean, I'm speaking to my normal everyday hunting where I'm at home. If I go on the road, well, like, Hunter and Chad came and hunted with me in Oklahoma. We're there for 4 or 5 days. We just got to hunt.
We're beating the woods, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Because you've got a time window.
Right. We're looking for one opportunity. We're scouting for one opportunity. We're not scouting for the season.
Right.
And those situations are different. But I'm talking about to the guy who's hunting the same area
Hometown
of public
hunter.
or their lease. That's their home lease. I try to, I've got early season strategies and I've got rut and late season strategies, and I hunt them very deliberately. And the thing about it is I probably spend less time in a tree stand that way than some people do.
Sure.
And sure, people do get lucky, but when you ask like, what do I think is the biggest key? If I can have places set up where I can really manage and eliminate as much human presence as possible until the time is right, I'd rather hunt 2 really good days than make 8 sits on mediocre days, hoping that I get lucky on those days.
Right.
Because it's just there's a negative return on that to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And I mean, heck, even just for the story, I'd rather once I harvest the deer, I'd rather say I had it all planned out and I did it perfectly and I executed my plan, rather than I got up and I just wanted to go hunt, so I sat in the woods and there's a salamander on our wall. Sorry.
Tis the season.
Boy, it is, ain't it?
That was my ADD kicking in right there.
That-
But yeah, no, I'd rather say that, you know, I had a plan, I executed the plan, and I harvested my deer because of the plan, rather than saying I just hopped in the woods and got lucky because the deer ran up on me and I wasn't really expecting it. So
Yeah. Well, I could tell you a story that kind of highlights what you asked me. So I still have this place. I didn't hunt it any last year, but it's just 27 acres, and it's real pretty swampy hardwoods, and it's kind of bordered between a neighborhood and a really big piece of property and a railroad track down one side. And so it's really isolated. There's no real, I mean, it's kind of landlocked. I have to walk down the railroad track to get into it.
sure.
And it's a beautiful place. I mean, beautiful. And I went in there in September, right at the end of September, and I think I went back one other time in early October and just walking the place and scouting. And I put out 3 cell cameras. Like I said, it's only 27 acres and it's all hardwoods. One side of it's got a thicket down a bayou, but all the rest of it's, you can pretty much damn near see the whole 27 acres in the wintertime. I put 3 cell cameras out on different trails and areas, and I had a stand in kind of a natural spot where I felt like the deer were coming in and out of that big open hardwood flat. And again, I went in September, I went back in October, early October, and I checked it, left my cameras running, and I left, and I did not go back. And I had 6 or 7 hammers on camera in there in October, but the wind was never right. I knew it wasn't right to hunt it, so I just left them alone. So fast forward to December, our rut here is sometimes December 15th through the 1st of the year, ish, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And on December the 19th, my wife had gotten kidney stones.
Mm.
And we were doing an outpatient deal one morning, and you know, they're doing the laser thing where they break them up or whatever. So I had to take her to the hospital.
Blasting them.
And for like a couple of days, as she started getting sick, and I'm like, I need to be hunting, and this Friday is the time. Like, it's going to be right. The wind's going to be right. The cameras are telling me there's 3 or 4 really nice bucks using this. They're walking that bayou. They're cutting across this hardwood flat. They're doing it in the middle of the morning, like every day.
Sure.
And I'm at the dang outpatient surgical center at like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm looking at my phone, and I'm looking at the weather, and I'm like, and she gets out of her deal, and she's still loopy on drugs, and I'm like hauling ass from Baton Rouge back to the house. I'm like, I got to get you home. I got to go get in the stand. Like, I need to be there by 10:30. Like, I got to be there by 10:30. Now, I hadn't stepped foot on this place since the 1st or 2nd week of October.
Mm-hmm.
And I got her home, got her comfortable, jumped in my truck, hauled ass, got in the stand at 11:30, and at 11:20, I shot an 8 point.
There you go. Heck yeah.
And it's like, and I mean, honestly, I'm sitting there. I hadn't been in the stand 10 minutes, and a little button buck starts feeding through, and 30 minutes later, I looked, and he's coming just like I knew he was going to. And I mean, no clue I was in the world. Just walked 7 steps from me. You know, just but I'm a firm believer in the fact that if I had been going in there once or twice a week hunting all the way since the 1st of October,
that wouldn't have happened.
I might have gotten lucky and killed one of those bucks during the rut on one of those hunts. I might have, but it wouldn't have been that predictable.
Sure.
Like, I knew that one of those, I had 3 different shooters on that property that by the time we had gotten, I had more than that throughout the year, but by that point in time, I had 3 different shooters, and I knew I would have bet you everything I had that between 10 and 2, middle of the day, it was like, it was like it was cold. It was a north wind. It was beautiful, high pressure bluebird day. I was like, but one of those is cruising through here during the middle of the day. Right. I knew they were, you know? So
it wouldn't be a far stretch of the
too,
imagination to say that your discipline is what got you that harvest.
Yeah, it is, because there were a lot of times where I had trail cam pictures. What I did was I put those cameras on feed trees, you know, the ones that were starting to drop in September and October. So I put them on feed trees and on that one trail that I suspected most of the deer were coming in and out of. And so there were a lot of times that year where I had a shooter buck coming to a feed tree 30 minutes before dark every day.
Mm-hmm.
and I probably could have went in there and climbed on the right wind side of that and probably could have killed one.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about it earlier. It's a lot harder to kill deer in that than it is. You get to the rut, this deer's probably walking 5 miles in a huge circle. And he's passing through my stuff for some reason in the middle of the day every day. They're passing through there. And like I said, once I saw him coming through them hardwoods for 200 yards away, and he was on a dead walk. I mean, no care in the world, just walked right past me. So, and like I said, I mentioned, kind of set it up for that reason. Like, this wasn't an easy place to access. There's no guarantee. If I had tried to go in there in the early season, there's no guarantee I'm not going to bump everything around there just trying to get in there. Because it wasn't like I could just walk in a road and be, have a good access point. I had to kind of really, and so the whole plan, part of that whole plan was, if I wait till the rut and I hunt it in the middle of the day, they're not going to be in there. I'm going to be able to get in there undetected. As opposed to earlier in the season, they're bedding all around this hardwood flat, and they're going in there and feeding on acorns, and then they're leaving. Right. And I don't know exactly where they're at. I have an idea, kind of.
Sure.
But all it takes is the wind to swirl or you to walk by one deer, and that deer blows the whole place out, And so, that kind of highlights what I was talking about. Is that's how I hunt.
Right.
And
right.
So
if I could put it into a nutshell, just based off of what you told us here on the pod, the way you like to hunt is you try to gather as much intel as possible before you go in for the kill.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
As much as I can.
Well, it's just hunting them optimal days.
Definitely.
Weather-wise.
I think people really it would benefit their hunting, at least from a success standpoint. It would benefit their hunting greatly if they could really kind of grasp hold of the fact that human pressure and human presence in the woods is
huge.
The biggest downfall to deer hunting mature whitetails.
Yeah.
And
if you really want to cripple yourself, put your scent throughout wherever you're hunting.
The common phrase that I hear all the time that I don't subscribe to it, and I kind of turn my nose up is that you can't kill from the couch.
Yeah.
That I hate that idea, because that basically lends itself to this idea that you just
got to get out there.
You abandon everything that we know about how a deer survives and lives, and you just go get out in his environment. And if you just match the hours with the season,
eventually you're going to run into him.
Yeah, you'll get lucky. And it does happen, and it happens because we're lucky enough to hunt in states and areas that are just full of whitetail deer. We have a plentiful, bountiful resource.
Yeah.
And so people do get lucky.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, like,
it also, I would say it also depends on what your goals are. Like, just like what you asked me, define success. Are you going for one specific mature buck? Or are you just going to see deer? Are you going to shoot a doe? Are you going to shoot, any buck that walks out, regardless if it's a mature buck or a young buck? That can change your strategy quite a bit. And it can also change how lucky you can get, because if your goal is just to go out and see deer,
seat time.
Yeah, seat time. Like, I would say that you're going to get lucky.
But like he said,
a lot higher chance of getting lucky.
A lot of the guys that are killing hammers, like, just for example, Lee Lukowski, he's not putting it, he's not a seat time type guy. He's a like Locke said,
right time.
He's
right
right conditions, He's calculated. Yep. Most of your hammer killers, they're
calculated.
You don't kill big bucks consistently by, like you said, just from putting your butt in a stand more than anybody else.
Sure.
Oh no, it's definitely worth saying that we're talking specifically about trying to kill mature deer with a bow and arrow.
Yes.
I mean, very, very specifically, we're trying to kill big deer with a bow and arrow. Now,
arguably the hardest thing to do in the deer woods.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and that's everything that I'm talking about lends itself to that general hunting style and strategy. And it doesn't, it's not meant to cast shadow on some. I mean, if your goal is, hey,
Yeah,
man,
yeah, no,
my
sure.
family's
Right.
got 200 acres and I just love to hunt every weekend.
Wear
and
it
I hope
out.
to fill as many
Get
as my
after it.
tags as I can. Then, hey, dude, put in your time. You're gonna, I know me personally. This is not meant to sound any way, one way or the other. It's just the fact. If I wanted to just kill deer,
Mm-hmm.
I could kill deer every weekend.
Sure.
I mean, and it's not because I'm a great hunter. It's because I have, I have places to hunt and I have time to hunt. And
Right.
if that was my goal, and there's nothing wrong with that goal, if that was my goal, I could fill the freezer up with does and kill a few bucks and probably kill a nice one every year.
Right.
Just simply by hunting a whole lot because I
Right.
have a lot of deer to hunt.
Yeah.
Your
But
deer
it's
dance.
just what I like. It's just that's what I like to do, is to try to outsmart a big mature deer.
It's a
you know?
lot. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a challenge.
Yeah.
And I should say this too. When I say I shouldn't say big mature. It's just that mature deer are usually big. I'm not.
Sure.
an inch
Amen.
guy. Dude, I don't. Down here where I'm at, if a deer gets to 100, I killed a 10 point here at my house back in 2019, I think it was. And he was 142 inches, and that is an absolute giant.
It's a big deer.
Sorry, my phone's ringing.
You're
That's an absolute giant for where I'm at. If I go to Kansas this fall and hunt the rut,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be too keen to shoot a 140-inch deer because there's a lot bigger deer there.
For
Sure.
sure.
But at the same time, I tell my cameraman this, and we filming hunts with Skre and all that kind of stuff. And dude, when we got all this invested, if a deer that I know is 5 years old, I don't care how many inches of horns he's got. If I know he's 5 years old
He's
and
getting
he's
it.
within 40 yards on camera, it's hard not to shoot his ass. Because that's what I'm there for. I want to shoot a big mature deer. And when I say big mature, I just mean big in body and age and
You could just
and
tell.
mature.
Yeah.
Well, Michael alluded to this a little bit in some of your comments. Like, when you set your goal on something and you get real surgical and strategic about how you do it and how you hunt, it becomes so much more gratifying when you finally make it.
100%.
Absolutely. We love it when a plan comes together.
Yep. That's what hunting has become for me at this stage of my life. Is my son, I have a 15-year-old son that loves to hunt. He shoots 2 or 3 deer a year. He loves it. We get plenty of meat. For me, that's what I'm there for. I don't care to, I don't care. I can go without shooting a deer, and I'm really okay with it. It's something about that strategy and almost like a battle, this kind of contest battle that you're in with a mature deer to outsmart him and get him close enough to shoot with a bow. That's what makes me tick.
It's a chess game.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Locke, I definitely appreciate you coming on. I think this was a great episode. There's a lot of information in here for our listeners to get from. A lot of good nuggets in here. Is there any kind of last remarks or tips or tricks that you would give to any of our listeners or any new deer hunters or even experienced deer hunters to where they might have a better chance in the woods this year?
Well, the one thing I'll say that we kind of alluded to it when you asked me what I thought was kind of the most important thing to me, or the most important key. I don't know how you phrased it, key to my success or whatever.
Yep.
And I ask you to separate, like, are you talking about encountering deer and having a good hunt? Or are you talking about actually being able to get a shot and kill a deer? And one thing that I would say, and this is a hard thing to do for anybody, especially if they're a new hunter, but I have found that you have to find a way to be extremely calm in the moment. You just have to, because it's not hard to kill deer with a bow. I mean, it's not easy to kill deer with a bow and arrow.
Right.
And for a new hunter, like, you got to do things, and I don't know exactly what all these things are, but like, you got to do things to kind of psych yourself out and be really calm and really focused on the actual execution of a shot, because we all know it. Everybody that's hunted long enough, if they don't know it, they will eventually. It is as gratifying as it is to do all the work and have all the patience and all the things that we've talked about, and then miss a shot, is equally as
devastating.
Whatever. It's as gratifying as it is to have success. It's equally as devastating.
Right.
When you do all that work and that deer runs off and you don't know if you'll ever see him again.
Right.
And
Yeah. Especially if it was
know,
something that was within your control.
And usually it is. Honestly, I mean, there are cases where just bad luck happens. You know, something crazy happens, and it just messes up your opportunity and whatnot. But generally speaking, it's usually you. It's usually something that you did, a move that you shouldn't have made when you made it, or a rush, or just a lack of focus because of your nerves and your anxiety and your excitement and all that kind of stuff. And that's hard. So, I mean, I think like you need to know your equipment really well. And that's part of being comfortable and calm with it is really knowing your equipment. But you got to find a way, man, to like, you identify that deer, your target, whether it's a 2-year-old 6-point in your first buck with a bow, or just a doe, or the mature buck that you were hoping for before the season started. You gotta have tunnel vision. You got to get to a point where when that deer gets to where, okay, he's about to be in my zone. He's about to be in my bubble. I got to be able to lock it in the same way. I mean, I coach baseball. You guys know that.
Oh yeah.
And this is the same thing that I teach my hitters is everything that happened in your last at bat, everything that happened on the pitch before, it doesn't matter. When you get to a competitive level, if you can't lock in on one pitch and have the right approach and have the right kind of focus and concentration to execute on one pitch, and you have to be able to do that pitch to pitch. You know, that's how people become really good hitters, and that, you know, other than their God-given talent. And I think in deer hunting, it's that way, and it happens through experience. But like, you got to be able to lock in and forget about the deer, you can't think about, man, it's gonna be so great when I take this deer back to camp and show my buddies.
Sure.
You can't start thinking that before you make the shot.
Sure.
You
Or
can't
what
be
if I miss?
Yeah,
What
like
if he
any of those
ducks?
kind of things, they have to leave your mind, and you have to start thinking about
Go through your
everything.
process.
Yeah, your process. Everything you've taught yourself of how to shoot that bow, how to position myself in this saddle or on this stand platform to make sure that I'm, you know, that all my mechanics are right, and being able to be able to just lock in and study that deer's body language and know when to take the shot, when to release the arrow. And all those kind of things are equally important, because you can do all this other stuff and you can be real smart and strategic about it, and you can get that deer in range. And then if you lose it's all over with anyway.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
so that's a big thing that we do, the Louisiana Bowhunter podcast down here, and we do it seasonally from September through February. And that's one of, like, the execution and the shot process is something we talk about a lot, because I think there's that one level of woodsman and somebody who's smart and spends a lot of time being in the right place at the right time and managing their property, or just being able to scout and find the right place. That's one part of a hunter. But as a bow hunter, the other part is you don't have to be a competition archer to be really, really effective with a bow and arrow, but you do have to have a sound mind and a slow heartbeat in the moment. You have to, you know, and so just learning that and figuring that out is just very important to me.
Absolutely. Well, Locke, we definitely appreciate you coming on. If any of our listeners want to come give you a follow or hit you up, where can they find you at?
Well, my name is spelled Locke, and my last name is Wheeler, Wheeler. So I think all of my my personal social media and stuff is just Locke Wheeler. And you don't meet a lot of Locke, so you can pretty much search for me and find me.
He's one of a kind, ladies and gentlemen.
But you can find a lot of my hunts and different stuff like that on the Skre gear social media and YouTube channel. I obviously work for Skre and have been with them for quite a time now. And a lot of my hunts are filmed and kind of just on there. I've actually gotten more over the last couple of years where I don't pay as much attention to my personal social media, because most of my content work goes to Skre. But
Sure.
But yeah, that's I'm not that hard to find.
Well, good to hear. Good to hear. Well, we definitely appreciate you hopping on the podcast with us and giving us and our listeners some tips and tricks for the deer woods. And I'll definitely be using some of those myself this year, putting those to practice. So.
Well, I'm glad you guys asked me to come on. It's that time of the year where, you know, actually you're not really doing me any favors, because I try to avoid the anxious anxiety of the coming deer season by just ignoring it. And now here I am
Sure.
talking deer hunting in May.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it's been fun. I'm glad you guys had me on, and hopefully we can get together and hunt again in the future.
For sure, bro.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll make it happen. Well, guys, we appreciate everybody tuning in for another episode of CRÜZR Radio, and we'll catch you on the next one.